Hey, hello guys, and welcome to the third and last video of this week, in which we are going to start with something really important, that is the third discourse, that is argumentation, right? The argumentative discourse. Um, let's say that I'm going to pass this first part really quickly, again, because this is something that you should have covered in composition with argumentative or persuasive paragraphs, and of course essay writing. Yes, basically argumentation is the basis, the base basis, well, one of those I forgot right now. Forgive me, look for it. um, well, it's the most important support for writing essays, right? You are supposed to convince the other person of something. You are supposed to effectively explain your point and provide the evidence of it. So let's say that I guess that at this moment, at this point of your career, 8th semester, you should be at least mildly aware of argumentation. Okay, we basically use this argumentative discourse in any situation in which we want to um, convince or persuade an individual or a collectivity, right? What's the difference between convince and persuade? Well, you can find many, but let's say that the most essential one will be that convince is to sort of make the other people believe in what you say, uh, make him or her somehow realize that your logical arguments are okay and are not disputable, or that, let's say, that have sufficient support, right? That is to convince. So I can be convinced that a certain cell phone is really good, for example, right? I can be convinced that learning Russian, for example, is really important, right? So the logical arguments of the person who presented the case to me convinced me of the importance of such language or the utility or good qualities of the cell phone. But convince goes until there, right? Now, persuade, it is the same that convincing, but it goes like a step further, and is that normally persuaded people act. Yes, so not only such person agrees with your arguments, but those agreements conduct him or her to action. So a persuaded person will normally buy the cell phone or study Russian, right? Not only he thinks that the cell phone is good or that Russian may be useful, but he is motivated enough, so he spends some money into buying the cell phone or studying this new language. Here we have within slide number 96, by the way, we have a lot of different situations in which we can use argumentation. In some other cases, we have already talked about this in detail, but you can imagine how important it can be, for example, for a job interview, for an art movie or a review, an art review or a movie review, yes, in which they try to convince us to go to watch a movie, to buy a book, to go to an exhibition, or on the contrary, they say that those are not really good. A debate, a political intervention, all these different things, right? There are a lot of different people who use argumentation. Specifically, let's say that I would risk to say that almost every human being uses argumentation in one point or another. But there are some that, because of their professions and their activities, usually have somehow more common, a more frequent usage of such type of discourse, such as teachers, politicians, religious preachers, people who write essays, advertisers, meaning people who work on marketing and try to sell you things, and different things, right? We can also mention that we can argument based on logic or rationality, and we can also do it based on emotion, right? So appealing to feelings or the affection or the reactions, the emotional reactions of our let's say of our listeners or people who we are trying to convince, right? So in order to ask your mom to, to let you have a puppy, for example, you could say that in a logical way, the puppy eventually will take care of the house, and that being responsible for a pet will make you a more somehow committed person, and will help you to improve your schedules, and will make you responsible with some other things. Um, Also, I don't know, maybe you could say that the house is really big and the puppy would not be a bother, right? So that would be logical, right? Based on rationality. But also you can appeal to emotions, right? So you can say that you want to have a puppy because you feel alone, because in the pandemic's time, like let's say company is really important, because caring for him will make you feel somehow not lonely, because normally you get attached to pets, and that's healthy for your emotional well-being or things like that, right? So you see, same situation, same let's say a way to try to convince, but one is appealing to rationality and one is appealing to the emotion. Like everything that we have studied so far, you can combine them. Yes, so you can create an argument that is part rational, part emotional, and that will be pretty useful as well. Okay, let's jump into the slide number 100, and here we're going to see something new for everybody, I guess. Yes, and it's the difference between argumentative discourse versus demonstration, right? This is really important because sometimes, and this is pretty common, sometimes people, especially these days, I mean, are not so interested in argumenting as to in demonstrating, as if you prove that the other person is wrong or something like that, right? So let's say that one has room for discussion, and that is argumentation, and the other one is already done. Once something is demonstrated, it's going to be like that forever, and somehow there's no any ways or any way to disprove that. Well, certain theories, specifically mathematical, physical, and things like that, have been disproved with the years, but in general, a demonstration just will remain forever. So if you take a look at that particular slide, you will see a comparison, like a contrast between argumentation and demonstration. So the first one, it says that argumentation is directed to an auditorium. So you normally prepare this because somebody is listening to you. This somebody can be another person, simply the person with whom you are having a casual conversation, a friend, nothing too formal, or it may be something you prepare for a class, something you prepare for a debate, well, all these different things. Yes, so normally when you prepare an argumentation, when you argument something, even if you're not prepared specifically, there's somebody listening to you immediately or will be in the near future. Now, a demonstration has value in itself. Yes, it means that when I discover, I create or put together a certain theory or formula or a mathematical constant or something like that, basically I do it for the sake of the same demonstration. Yes, of course, eventually I am going to share that with other people, but the demonstration is valid in itself. The same exercise of demonstration is somehow useful. Yes. Now, normally you don't argument if you're alone. Yes. Probably you do it mentally to convince maybe yourself of certain things. Yes, I guess that scenario is not so impossible. But under normal conditions, you prepare your argumentation for something else to convince such person of doing something, whatever, right? Well, second, number two is it is usually expressed in natural language in argumentation, and it is expressed in formal language. So normally you either have a very casual conversation, as I mentioned before, an informal one, or even when you prepare a certain argumentation, well, you may include vocabulary and language of certain fields, but it is not so technified. Demonstrations, such as the one done for vaccines, such as the ones done for, let's say, mechanical issues, for example, coefficients of statistic value, well, different things related to something much more formal has formal language. Yeah, they are expressed in this technical language. So normally, if you take a publication, let's say an index magazine of Spanish, Spanish language or English language or something like that, even though that is not your field, you're very likely to understand the general postulates. Yes, because normally these disciplines, these subject fields, such as languages, do not demonstrate anything. They make propositions and they argument and propose certain good practices, right? Nevertheless, if you do the same with some other fields of knowledge, such as the ones that I have mentioned, or chemistry or something like that, so even if you know the language, maybe you don't understand necessarily what is proposing there, right? Because of these things related to technical language. Now, number three, that is really important, I think that is one of the most important characteristics of argumentation, is that the premises, what I propose, are likely plausible in reference to a system of values, right? So, likely, it means very possible, no? Plausible means very reasonable, right? But all this in reference to a system of values. So it always has like a framework to which I can compare it. Yes? So, for example, I can say that in our somehow system of values, it is likely and plausible that you can find pleasure in eating meat, for example, eating a steak or doing a barbecue or something like that. Yes? And you could say that you may find pleasure in that because you exchange experiences, socialize with people. Normally it's a family gathering time or a friend gathering time. And those might be my arguments for saying that eating meat, beef, it's okay. So you see, likely and plausible in our system of values. But what if I say that in an Indian system of value? Well, because of religious issues and because of cultural issues, that argument is not valid anymore, and actually is completely opposed to what they think. So you see, they are likely to happen, likely to be accepted in a certain framework, in a certain context. Different from demonstration. Premises are true or false, and they are absolute. Yes? So, such as the composition of water, the boiling point of liquids, the freezing point of certain elements, right? No matter your location, no matter where you are, no matter your cultural background, demonstrations are true or false, period, no more, right? And that is the whole point of argumentations. That I will speak about it in number 5. Sorry. Number 4, its progression depends on the orator. Basically, you are going to argument good, bad, or more or less. If you're a good, bad, or not so good orator, right? The way in which you present your arguments orally or in written way is going to be the way in which they are presented, right? And they are accepted. I'm sorry. If you do not present very good arguments, I mean, the way in which you transmit it is not really effective. No matter how good they are, it's possible that people wouldn't be convinced. Yes, like if you're a little bit sort of shy or not so sure and insecure, well, that is going to affect directly your argument. Different from demonstration. Yes, you can be the shyest of scientists, but if your document, your text demonstrates certain things, that has total validity. Yes, it depends on the internal mechanism. So if you were able to demonstrate certain things by experiments, by repetition, by different things, so it's going to be demonstrated, and that's it. Yes, no matter how you communicate it, even if it's in a clumsy way, that is going to be still valid. And finally, we're going to have this final part in which conclusions are always debatable for argumentation. Sure, you can discuss 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours a week, and the conclusions that you are going to have are always going to be debatable, right? They are going to be open to discussion. We can have another discussion in there, and still probably you have not totally convinced your interlocutor. Different from demonstration, in which conclusions are either true or false, and that's it. Yes, so you perform experiment, an observation, verify it, analyze it, and you're supposed to have most of the times quantitative results that prove or disprove what you're saying, and that's the end of the story, right? Those are basically let's say the components over there, right? Well, guys, with this we're finished for this week, and here we go then with the explanation of the second part of the assignment. Remember that in the previous video I already explained the first part, and this is going to be the second one that will be based on the poem that I read for you at the beginning. Okay, so please, you're going to read it or listen to it again, and you are going to decide what is the strongest type of discourse that is there from the ones that we have studied, of course. No, so is it descriptive, is it narrative, or is it argumentative? Okay, verify, check it, listen to it, and analyze it. I know that as we have mentioned before, these may have different components or mixed components. Probably when you analyze it, you see, okay, it has argumentative, but also has narrative, or it has this part that is descriptive. Okay, but you are going to select the strongest classification, right? You're going to say, yes, it has a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but in general, it is descriptive, or narrative, or argumentative. Okay? Attention to what's next. First of all, identify. Okay? So, if it is descriptive, if you decide that it's descriptive, you are going to please identify and describe the subcategories of description. Okay, so if you decide that the text or that poem that I read, is descriptive, that is what you're going to do. If you decide that it is mostly a narrative, so what you're going to do is to make the superstructure, right? So I already explained it in the previous video. Actually, you have to do it in the first. So if you think that's the one, you're going to do it in that way. Okay, and in the final one, if you decide that it's argumentative, okay, so you're going to mention why it is argumentative and not a demonstration. Yes, Basically, that's it. I have just explained that. So you're going to mention, of course, with examples of the text of the poem, that why is it argumentative instead of a demonstration, right? Of course, the idea is that you use elements from the poem in order to support your affirmations, and also it is not necessary that you translate the poem. I mean, if you're going to use, for example, quotes from the poem, you can do it in Spanish, no problem. You can use it, but of course, the rest of the text or the report that you write will be in English, right? Everything's in English. The Spanish will be only for quotes. That's it. Remember, 4 people maximum. Only one assignment. I mean, put it together in one single document. The homework of the previous video for the superstructure, and this one for the identification. You put it in the same document. Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much. A pleasure as usual, and have a great rest of the day. Bye bye.